Hi, everybody. This is David Johnston, the founder of Transcend Admissions Consultants. In our series, Transcend Talks, we talk to some of our outstanding previous clients to learn more about their insights from graduate school and what they've been doing after graduation in their careers. And today, we're really fortunate to talk to Ginger.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ginger. I was born and raised in Taiwan, and I came to the States to pursue my MBA at Cornell Johnson in 2012. So I'm a class of 2014. And since then, I have been living and working in New York at Citibank.
Okay, thank you. So, I think you applied quite a few years ago.
Yes.
More than 10 years ago, actually, or maybe 10 years ago. But if you wouldn't mind, like, thinking back to that time, like maybe you could share a little experience or memory from your MBA application time.
It was definitely a journey because I was preparing for it while working full time in Beijing at that time, actually. And my work was very demanding. I work about 10 to 12 hours every day. And yet I was determined to apply for an MBA in the US. And so the best experience I had, though, just in spite of the challenge, is that time management is very important. And I was very fortunate enough to have a group of friends who happened to apply either MBA or a graduate degree, in Europe or US at that time. So we would form a study group together, usually after work or during weekend, to push each other, to study together. So we may not always study the same thing, but I think it's important to have that rapport and have a group of people to support you, both physically and mentally together. And I think the hardest part for me at that time was GMAT, because like I said, I work very long hours. And so it took me a while to get used to studying, and to really sit down, and read a book, and do the prep exams for hours. But eventually I got past it. And thankfully, I was, able to have a lot of help, like David, you, to help me with the interview, and writing essays, to get admitted. So I think everyone's journey is different. For me in particular, the challenge was taking the exam or spending time to prepare for the exam, right? For some people, it may be preparing for interview. So knowing where you may have the challenge in advance, know yourself, and spend more time tackling those is very important.
But at some point you decided that you wanted to pursue an MBA and that you needed an MBA. But there may be people listening to our video here thinking maybe they haven't even decided yet. They're really thinking, should I really get an MBA? So what advice would you give to people like this when you're trying to decide whether or not to get it? Because let's face it, not everyone who takes GMAT will really apply. And some people will think about it and they might not. But what advice would you give people like this?
I think it's very important to evaluate and write down 3 things, right, that you want to get out from this. It has to be only 3. It cannot be 4. There are a lot of alternatives, right? So typically, coming out of MBA, you're able to change one of the 3 things. So you may be able to change the industry you're working at. You may be able to change your location or geography. You may be able to change the function, right? So for example, if you used to be HR, but you want to go into finance, I would say, most people can change one of the 3. 50% of people can change 2 out of 3. If you're very diligent and you have the right opportunity, you can change all 3, right? So think really hard whether or not it makes sense for you, right? Because you may just be not happy with the manager or boss you're working at. You don't necessarily want to change any one of those 3. In that case, spending the time and money, because let's face it, MBA is a very expensive degree, may not make sense for you. For me personally, I wanted to change all 3. So I was looking into changing your location. I always knew since I was in college that I wanted to pursue a graduate degree somewhere in the US. I have done some visits growing up in the US. I have studied 1 year in undergrad in the US. So I knew I wanted to come here to live and work. And so I wanted to change geography, and I wanted to change the industry. I wanted to see what it's like, in the tech companies here. And I wanted to see what I can do, stretching my horizon a little bit more than marketing, going into maybe product management. And so I was fortunate enough to be able to change that through this degree. And again, and the other part is when you should do it, right? So a lot of people who are thinking about it, you have to think about whether now is the right time. And what that means is that whether you're mentally prepared for it, also if does it make sense for your career, right? If you're in a position where you believe you can, again, back to those three components or elements, if you think you can get one of those three or maybe all three with your current career, then maybe it's not worth investing in this degree.
So I think it's really evaluating your current opportunity and how big the change is will help you make this decision, right? You made this decision, you worked very hard, you were able to get into a really great MBA program at Cornell. And maybe you could share some happy memory about your life at Cornell.
Yes, absolutely. I definitely enjoy my time there a lot. I think two of the best memories I had. One was I remember every Thursday we have the social event facilitated by the school. We called it Sage Social because our building is called Sage Hall, and so it was not just like chit chatting with free or complimentary food. Most importantly, it's time for you to build network with your classmates and friends. More often than not, I think at least once a month, we will have special themes. So we will have corporates like Citi who participated in Sage Social. We may have a partnership with West Point. So we will have, some people from West Point coming to join us. And sometimes, in this case, they will have some speech. Each event may have different theme. Some of them could be about diversity. The other times it could be about leadership. So those could be very interesting, and especially for when in the case where there's corporates joining this event, it's actually a very important first step for you to get in touch with those corporate leaders, and who knows, it could land you an internship or a full-time job at the end.
I think you said the name of it is called Sage Social, right? So that
Yes.
implies it's a social event, but the way you explain it, sometimes it sounds a little bit more professional than social. So would I want to treat that like a real networking event? Would I show up in a suit? Or how should people behave at events like that?
For Johnson, we usually wear business casual. So you shouldn't expect to show up in classes with flip flops and PJs. I know different schools may have different culture, but in general, Johnson is more business casual. You definitely don't have to wear full on suits. But for Sage Social, again, because it's a social event, you don't have to bring resume. You may actually turn people off. You all of a sudden hands on my resume. But I always say that networking is work, right? So what it means is that how do you build relationship by talking to people? How do you show that you're genuinely interested in the corporation and also want to understand more about the company culture? So a lot of times during the recruiting process, what people are looking for is really cultural fit, right? Obviously, skill sets are important, but at the end of the day, if there are two candidates with equal skill sets and experience, people are looking for a cultural fit. So those social events are actually very important for you to understand whether or not you fit it. Because one way is that they're evaluating you, but you are also assessing whether or not you like the companies, right? So that's the main purpose of those social events.
So I may want to treat it like I'm getting to know them, like I'm talking to a representative from Google who showed up, rather than we're interviewing here, right?
Absolutely. And very common questions include you know, how do you end up in Google? How do you like Google? You know, so don't make it sound like it's all about you, but more about you're generally interested in the companies.
Before you were going to continue and say something else that you really enjoyed about the program, which was the career tracks, right?
Yes, I absolutely love the international career tracks. Well, we actually have domestic, international, but I obviously like the international better. So I was
Mm.
fortunate enough to visit Japan and Israel career tracks with my classmates. And because it's a career track, it's still semi-formal. So during the daytime, we had plans to visit different types of companies. So for Israel, we were very fortunate enough to visit military, you know, base and different types of, you know, corporations, business related. We were able to meet with the mayor of Tel Aviv the year before us. They met the prime minister. So a lot of very cultural, business related, and it could be political, you know, very educational program for a week or two. And again, you don't know where those lead to, right? So during those time, because you bonded with your classmates, you may get to know people more. And because of those experience, especially for post MBA graduates who are looking for international opportunities, those could come up with very good talking points when people approach you, and also when you're looking for you know, international companies who may have the base in the countries that you have visited.
Yeah, going back to Cornell, just I think it's a pretty famous school. A lot of people do know a lot about it, but maybe is there something you'd like to tell us, like people don't know, that you'd like to share
Yes,
about Cornell?
I think Johnson is a very small class size, right? In general, the 2 year program is only around 200, less than 300. I mean, adding executive program, still, right? Less than 400 for sure. So you will get a lot of attention from professors, and you will have more opportunities to get to know people more, right? Because of that. So basically, the first day we got into school, I remember our orientation, the professor basically said, all right, look around you. This is it. This is the people you're going to hang out with in the next 2 years, just those 275 people. But Cornell is very large, and that's why people often forgot. So Cornell has very large size of undergrad community, as well as graduate programs, right? Johnson or business school is just one of them. So what I found very beneficial is everywhere I go, even still today at Citi, I may not meet that many people from Johnson, but I meet a lot of people from Cornell alumni network. Whenever that comes up, you will still, you know, feel the tie, and you will still talk to each other because you have that relationship. So professionally, what it means is that you will have a big and wide network. You know, the other part is Cornell has been doing very well, I feel like, recently in connecting alums after graduation. So they actually have a program for entrepreneurs who graduate from Cornell. Again, not just Johnson, but Cornell in general, reaching out to alums. So I actually receive emails from those alums who are entrepreneurs and say, hey, I saw your profile. I thought maybe you're a great fit for, you know, my startup. Are you interested in talking?
Let's talk about some of your post MBA experience. So, I mean, now that you reflect on your career, what do you think is the most important skill or knowledge you learned in MBA that's benefited you so far professionally?
I think being able to influence decision makers without authority is the most important thing. And that's a leadership quality. What that means is that when you first graduated, right, most likely you will be a management associate or a managerial role. You will not be a CEO unless you start your own company, right? So what you need to do is to build your personal brand, and be able to influence decision maker with, you know, obviously, I'm sure coming off from a top MBA program, you are good at strategizing and speak up. And that's a leadership quality. I found that's the most important coming up from MBA program. A lot of people would think that MBA provides a framework where you can apply this framework to just solve any problem. And that's not the case, because in real world, you can have different solutions for different scenarios and in different time, right? But coming out of the program, for me also mentally, the biggest change I have and what I learned through those 2 years is that I actually have more confidence whenever problems arise. So coming out of the school, I became more confident because I went through a thorough program to teach me how to solve problems. And again, it's not always one size fits all, right? And that those two skill sets are very crucial. Even 10 20 years out of the school, that I found the most helpful from the school. Obviously, like I just said, network is always very important. Coming from growing up from Taiwan, I didn't really know how to do network because I was very used to very lecture based kind of education. I don't know how to network with my peers or my superiors, which may not be a big deal in a corporate environment in Taiwan. But working in the US, understanding how to network, starting from, like I said, the stage social is a great opportunity every Thursday to practice, is very important for me personally.
Now, I want to go back to the previous thing you said, where it sounds like you had the confidence and the ability to face problems and solve them, which you seem to think that's like one of the biggest values you got from this education, right? How do you think an MBA teaches you that?
Business school is all about case studies, right? Well, how Johnson is structured a little bit different. In that first semester, we have core courses. In my time, there were 6, right? So there was finance, marketing, operations, etc. Then after that, you have a lot of case studies, right? It was through those case studies and a lot of consulting classes, a lot of leadership workshops and classes that help build the confidence for me. Another thing that's not taught by the professors or program, but you learn from your peers, right? So MBA is like a microcosm of a society in that you get to meet every possible industry and function you can think of, and they deliberately do that, right? When they pick the candidates for top programs, they deliberately make sure that they pick from different industries, and then you learn different ways of thinking, from people from different industries.
Do you think it's possible to get the same effect if you're just studying online? I know that a lot of things can be learned online, but is it one of those things where you just have to be there and be immersed in it to really get that type of training?
I know that there are some online programs, whether for MBA or other disciplines. I think for MBA, though, specifically, you do want to have that class environment. A lot of it is I learned from my peers, not necessarily from a professor or from the books, right? You learn a lot from them through class discussions and through, socializing. A lot of it is, outside the class environment. So I do think it's one of those programs that you do want to immerse yourself in a real life scenario.
But maybe you can talk a little bit about what's been going on since you graduated. Would you mind saying in a little bit more detail your career progress?
So I joined Citi through a leadership program for post MBA. It's called MA program, and Citi recruited from I think 8 to 10 top MBA programs for MA, and then coming here, it's a 2-year rotation program. So for my year, I rotated into different teams within the organization. Now I think they made it even more diverse. You were allowed to rotate in 3 different teams in 3 different completed business lines. You can do investment banking, corporate banking, and consumer banking. Whereas I did 2 rotations in consumer banking. Then after you came out from a leadership program, you're responsible to land a promotional role by yourself. So I was able to land a vice president role after coming out from the program in consumer lending, specifically in the cards business. And after about maybe a year and a half, I just felt like I wanted to learn more. So my manager at that time nominated for another leadership program, which is international. It's called Global Talent Development Program. I was fortunate enough to pass and then rotated in Singapore's regional office, working in digital acquisitions team for 6 months as expatriate. Before coming back here, I joined the retail banking business line because I have stayed in the credit card business for 5 years. I just wanted to know what's happening, in the retail banking world. So right now, I have been, my role has transitioned a little bit to become more product management from marketing, in that my role is to design go-to-market strategies for new offers. So I would say it's quite an interesting journey. And what I loved about leadership program, and that's actually, some people actually focus on looking for leadership programs coming to MBA for recruiting. The good thing about leadership program is that you almost feel like you're doing another MBA, and that you have a class of people that are your age and your experience, where you can grow together. If you ever work in a big corporation, you will know that it's never a shortage of issues. You can find problems every day, but it's the person who can help you solve the problem that matters, right? And that's where today I still leverage a lot of the network I built through the MA or the leadership program. Again, those leadership programs come in very handy because people know that you have been through a strict selection process, and therefore you're more likely to be considered for a promotional role.
All right, so these leadership development programs sound really excellent for giving you a lot of exposure, both functions and even
Yeah.
international exposure, right? So
Mhm.
is it accurate that at the end of the rotation, it's not clear where you're going to be permanently placed, and you need
Right.
to kind of find it and advocate for it? Is that right?
Yes. And so that's another journey, right? And that's actually a leadership training itself, in that you have to take ownership of your own career. And what it comes down to is, what do you want to do? And also whether or not you can leverage your skill sets that you build, as well as your network in those 2 years, to land a role that you like in a promotional role. So yeah, so I definitely think it's worth recruiting if anyone's ever interested in a leadership program.
Okay, sounds great. A lot of your positions after the program have been in the marketing function, right? So maybe you could talk about, if I want to work in a marketing function in the finance sector, in the banking industry, which, it's different than consumer products.
Right.
Is there some like way to prepare for that, or some, what do you see as the difference between a job like this compared to consumer products?
Sure. I think in general, marketers have to be very curious and inquisitive about the world in general. What's different though in the bank industry is that you have to be very quantitative, because banking is all about numbers, right? The other piece is that banking is a highly regulated industry. So I often say that you have to learn to innovate within the borders or within the box.
Mhm.
But for the most part, we have to think innovatively, within a border. So those are the two things I would say you need to be mentally prepared coming to become a marketer in the banking industry. Another thing is, I would say this is the most important thing. I think the border of banking and tech is blurred, right? So nowadays, if a tech company has a banking license, they may as well just operate as a bank, and they have a better
Mm.
platform, right? So what we need to do in a bank is to keep up with those trends, to make sure that we can provide these services and platform that customers expect from Amazon, from Alibaba, because they are used to using very seamless experience already when they purchase and use other services, and they will expect the same from banking. So I would say that marketers need to keep yourself updated with those trends. There are many ways you can do it. You can join a lot of groups, different forums. There are always, especially in the US, there are a lot of associations for marketing, digital marketing, mobile marketing. I think those are very great sources of new information.
And are there any particular skills or knowledge that you really recommend people to have who want to get into the marketing function?
I wish when I was at school, I would have taken more, or the school had provided more more courses related to the tools that we use every day for digital marketing, right? Things like Adobe Omniture, which we call SciCAD, SQL. Those are very basic, I would say, data analytics and coding skill sets that can come in very handy. And I think the goal is not for you to become an engineer unless you want to change your career. The goal is to have the language, right? So when you talk to people, you can use the same lingo and then make people understand that you actually know a lot about digital marketing. So I would say, I wish when I was at school, I had taken more time or more courses related to data analytics or a lot of the useful tools that we will use every day in digital marketing.
Okay, well, luckily, I think you can still have a chance to learn those online. There's many resources for those tools.
That's what I did actually. In my first few years at Citi, I did take online courses. I actually spent some money, pay some tuition off work as well to pick up coding for website and data analysts, etc. But like I said, if you had the opportunity to learn that MBA, I think you should definitely take advantage of that.
Okay, so I think a very important point here, everyone. She's still taking courses. She's never stopped learning. And just one more question for fun. So you haven't been living in Taiwan for a few years. What do you miss most about living in Taiwan?
I miss the people the most. I miss it's just that people are so nice and generally friendly to strangers. I've never been to a country. This might be biased because I came from Taiwan, but
just a little bit biased.
Right. I just never been to a country that makes me feel or make anyone feel welcome, really. Right. I think people are really our biggest assets. And the other thing I miss about obviously is food. I could use beef noodles anytime. So every time I went back home, the first thing I did is to find beef noodles. And I tried all the beef noodles here, but I just had beef noodles for dinner actually, but it doesn't taste the same at all. So those are the two things I miss the most about.
Well, welcome back anytime to have some beef noodles and many other things. Really appreciate you taking the time to share with us. I think you've got some really great insights and some valuable knowledge, and we can learn a lot from you. Good luck in the future too.
Thank you.